Hey guys, welcome back to Time Under Tension. Today is episode 8. We're going to be talking about go before you know, which is a topic that we'll kind of explain in a minute here. But first, I want to give you a quick, random, completely unrelated story. So, as you may or may not know, if you follow me, my ex-husband and I got a Rottweiler together, and he has her now. And she's about a year and a half old now, and he got a call today at work that the apartment manager would like to meet with him and come over and investigate the situation because someone reported that he's harboring a baby black bear.
Are you serious?
Which I think is just kind of funny to think about, someone really going out of their way to call the apartment complex about this very unlikely situation, considering this dog looks absolutely nothing like a black bear. And is that really that common in Dallas? I'm not sure, but he had to leave work early, and his boss asked him why, and he's like, if I tell you, I really don't think you'll believe me. Like, you will think I'm lying. And she was like, don't tell me then. And then at the end of the day, she asked him, and he told her, and she's like, that's like, there's literally no way that that's true.
Are there black bears in Texas? I don't even know.
I don't know. If you know, leave it in the comments below, because I'm very ignorant to this topic. So last week we talked about out of the box, breaking out of the box, kind of unraveling some of the beliefs that we have that hold us back or keep us trapped in a very limited view of ourselves or prevent us from expanding as people. So we gave you a challenge at the end of that podcast to identify a belief that's driving your habits or behavior that doesn't serve you, but identifying it's going to be the first step to unraveling it and putting a better belief in place. So what did you find out from this assignment? What is a belief that you unraveled?
Yeah, I think mine actually happened yesterday. I was gonna talk about one, but this is the one that I feel like God's telling me to share. I found that there is a disconnect in my mind between surrendering to God and surrendering my body image and the validation that comes with what I believe to think that my body image represents. So the difference was, I feel like if God were to ask me to surrender myself, it was a story about Abraham and his son and how God asked him to sacrifice his only son. And I knew that I couldn't have any kind of understanding knowing I wasn't a parent, but what it really brought to my attention was that I feel like if God asked me to surrender my life, I wouldn't struggle with that, but I am struggling, have been struggling to drop the idea that if I don't have what I believe to be the perfect body, then my purpose, my significance to the world and to other people is only in alignment with how close to that perfect body I am. And so what I then realized was that my association with sacrificing self was relieving the tension and the stress and the pressure of what I feel every day with my body image and that belief that keeps me so trapped. So understanding that I really was just, I crave so badly to step out of that box and be able to completely dissociate all of the hurt and the pain and the struggle that I feel with that is what I thought to be full surrender, when really it was just a means to an end. And so it really just clarified a lot of what true dying to self every day really means in my life, is surrendering the idea that my body is the thing that's creating my significance in the world. And so replacing that, the replacement thought is I am now on Ephesians 2:8-10, where God states that we are created for the good works that he's already laid out ahead of us. And so the good works that I do through my spirit, through my light, through just being my most authentic self is already victorious in itself and significant in itself, because that purpose is already laid out. It's just making sure I'm doing the works in alignment with that. That was a lot.
No,
But that's
no, I think, and that's what I think about a practice like this. Like, it takes a long time to kind of unravel this stuff, but you can find one thread to pull on and realize how much of your identity is tied into that belief that's no longer serving you. And with that, it, in one sense, it can be overwhelming because it can feel like I just opened up this Pandora's box of chaos in my mind and all these things I don't actually believe. And I don't even know where to go from here because everything that I do is rooted around these things. But in another sense, it's like, yes, you found the weak link and now you can rebuild, and you just change a lot of different aspects of your life just by shifting that one thought.
What was yours?
For me, I seriously value being efficient and productive. And I think some of that's based on my work history and the way that I've been trained in a work environment. But it is a very anxiety provoking part of who I am, where I feel like if I'm not being efficient, time efficient in the simplest ways, like if I take something from one room to the next, and then I come back and I see something in that room that I also need to take to the other room, I'll like in that moment be mad at myself that I didn't see that first, because now I'm wasting time going to get that second thing. Whereas if I had been paying more attention, I would have been more efficient. And it starts at small things like that, and it translates into every other area, especially in a work setting. And it can be very, very anxiety provoking for me. And I mentioned this to my counselor a couple months ago and talked about just that need to be efficient and how that's so important to me, and how it's a lot of my thoughts are centered around that. And she said, that's great if you're a robot. And it was the first time that I realized that I really tried to live my life as if I'm a robot. I want to pre-program everything, automate everything to be as efficient as possible. But in that, I lose the joy of being human. I lose the sense of humor of experiencing life in a chaotic way that is intrinsic to who we are as imperfect beings, and part of the daily experience, where you're able to have these unique experiences each day because of the imperfections of our operating system, so to speak. So just working on giving myself grace in moments like that, and also not prioritizing efficiency over active involvement in life. So today we're talking about go before you know. And this kind of speaks to what you were saying about that daily surrender. I think that really ties into this. This idea is that we have to act in obedience with what God is calling us to do, or however you see that, whether that's your intuition or that gut feeling, to act in obedience to that without necessarily knowing where it's going to lead, without being able to see the full picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just listening because I think this is so important. It just feels really heavy in a great way, because this is something that I feel that when we were talking about this, I didn't necessarily think I really had any examples to share, because I felt like I was paralyzed by the idea of taking action, because I never got rooted in knowing my intuition. And so I was struggling to take action and just kind of defaulted to surrender to God. His plan will work itself out, without actually taking any action moving forward. That all because I didn't have trust in myself, and I didn't trust my decision making. And so I just think the work that God has allowed me to do in this space is really cool. It all started back when I was first kind of realizing that my mind and body were extremely separated. It was like my neck was this thing that actually didn't exist or something. It's like my head and my mind was driving all of my behavior, and I had zero connection to my body. And so I was just trying to make all these decisions with my mind. And it wasn't until I really felt like connecting to my intuition, I was able to understand that action through faith and trust was a part of surrendering your will to God.
And there's this push and pull here. There's a quote by William Ernest Henley, and he said, "I'm the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul." And I've seen that in every setting, a lot of tattoos on that. And I think that people just love that concept of like, I'm in charge of my life and I drive the ship. And, it's like, yes, you are. You have free will. That is a beautiful gift, but you aren't the author of the story, and you aren't the one laying the path. I think about movies like, I don't know, you've probably never seen it, but Indiana Jones or something, where those adventure movies where they get to this point and they're like running from something and the ground is like moving and they don't know what tile to step on, and you have to like kind of step on a tile and then this tile like dissolves and you have to like jump back and like jump on the next tile. And it's like, I think that that's more how it is. You're the one navigating, but you need to be attentive and aware to what's happening, what you're called to do, and trusting your intuition that, oh, once I recognize the pattern here of how the tiles are dissolving, or once I have the information of I stepped out here and it didn't work and now I need to reroute, you're the one making those in the moment decisions, but you need to be really in tune as to what you're being called to do in that moment and the steps that are actually presented in front of you. So I think it's that push and pull of understanding what you actually are able to control and what you actually have to surrender.
Yeah. And I think that I know we talked about trusting God in this space, and we talked about the previous sermon about how we're really seeing our lives as individual ingredients in a whole meal. And I just think that speaks extremely to just how much we sometimes tend to just look at this one specific thing that we're doing and thinking that that is just the one thing that we have to just fixate on, when really this is all a part of a greater meal. It's just going to manifest itself into this, what you want to say, delicious, if that's fine, like thing. You have to trust that whatever it is, that it might taste bad at the time, but whatever is coming to fruition from that decision is going to be good.
You don't know really why you're called to do something. I kept feeling like I needed to be a Lyft driver. Like I need one more thing to do, or want to sit in a car and small talk with people, which are like two things that I would not want to spend any more time doing, but I was convinced that I needed to do it. And I kept hearing people talk about it and I'm like, well, maybe that's a sign. So I went to sign up to be a Lyft driver and they rejected me. And I was very irritated. And they said that my license was suspended. And I was like, that's ridiculous. And I looked and my license had been suspended for months because apparently a speeding ticket a couple years ago, I was supposed to take a class. I don't even know. I never heard about this. And apparently my license was suspended. And that's what I found out through this process. And I went through the training and got it all reinstated. It was just this long DMV course, which was super fun. And then I got it reinstated and Lyft still wouldn't take me because it was on my driving record. And I was irritated because I was like, I was going to use this as an alternate source of income. Like I was going to be a Lyft driver. Why is everything so hard? But what I was missing was the fact that like, I'm so thankful that I found out that my license was suspended because I applied to be a Lyft driver and not because I got in a wreck or got a speeding ticket and then ended up with a massive fine for driving with a suspended license. So there was like a gift in it all. And maybe that was the whole purpose of that. And maybe that was God saying, hey, you need to address this. And I just didn't understand the big picture. And even still, after it happened, I refused to see the blessing in it immediately. I was caught up in this plan that I had, as opposed to the step that I was taking in the present moment, and how my plan had been foiled. And I was missing the fact that I got exactly what I needed in the first place out of that situation.
Totally. I think that's great. I think you talking about this push and pull, that resistance to some of the things that we tend to not do because of the resistance, but there's also the things that we did do through the resistance that produce this fruition, this new lesson learned. And that there are examples of reasons why you need to go before you know, I think for both of us. You want to share a couple of yours?
Yeah. Go before you know. So coming out was a massive shift in my life. And it's something I don't really talk about because I don't love that phrase coming out. I feel like it was more of a learning of self, and my life changed because of that awareness that was created. And it wasn't like a big public event for me. So I don't know, I have some like mixed feelings about that phrase, but I'm more apt to say it now because I think that it creates a dialogue for people who also feel like they're in a similar situation. I had been told my whole life that being gay was wrong, it's a sin, and it can't coexist with faith. That it's a sin just like any other sin, murder or theft, and your choice to be gay is the choice to reject God. And so I wanted to just believe that because that's all I'd been told. I couldn't imagine that it could be any other way other than what my elders and the people that I respected had told me. And I kind of let their stories and let their beliefs dictate the way that my life was, the trajectory of my life. And I wanted to know, okay, if I made this call where I finally embraced this part of myself that I've felt my whole life, that and I'm led to this place now where I need to finally address it. I want to know how it's going to play out. I want to know that my family's going to still accept me. I want to know that I'm not going to deal with flack from people. I want to know that I'm not going to be rejected by the church. I wanted to understand the whole picture before I did it. I wanted to know the implications and the consequences. And this is a decision, I guess, in terms of coming out in public, that is just laced with unknowns. You have no idea what kind of response you're going to get from it. And despite my mental preparation for it, or whatever that looked like, I had no idea how people were going to react or how this would actually change the course of my life. And I had to make this decision finally where it was like my intuition was telling me, hey, everything in your life has led you to this point where you finally need to make this call that's going to change your life. And I had to decide whether I was going to listen to that intuition or stick with what I knew, because I thought I knew what the consequences of this safer option would be, not even seeing what the end point would be if I spent my entire life rejecting who I was. Maybe that would be a shorter life for me. Maybe that would be laced with regret. I don't know. But in my mind, because it seemed predictable, it seemed like the safer option, even though at the end of the day, if you have two options in front of you, you have no idea how either one is going to pan out. Just like I had no idea that going with Lyft would have led to finding out my license was expired and that being the purpose, or suspended and that being the purpose of the entire endeavor. In this case, I thought I knew, okay, if I follow these rules, then I will be rewarded in these ways. And this was the choice of, but I have this deeper intuition that's telling me what I need to do right now and who I need to own up to being. And out of that came this fountain of growth that I could have never anticipated. I received, yes, there were some difficult conversations, especially with family, and I haven't had a lot of conversations still. But socially, it has opened the door to have some incredible dialogue with people who I've never met before, who come to me and say, hey, I'm struggling with this as well. How did you do it? It's created this opportunity to show people that yes, you can be gay and you can have faith, and those two are not mutually exclusive, and you are accepted by God. And if I can show one person that they are accepted and created by God to be exactly who they are, like that path was worth it all along. But I couldn't have predicted that from the start. And so that was just one piece in a puzzle where I started recognizing how just taking these leaps of faith, stepping forward and seeing if the stone dissolves, that's what it takes. It takes that step forward first, and then you kind of know where to go from there. And it's given me a lot of opportunities to show love to others and share God with them outside of the internal growth that I've experienced just from that whole massive growth period.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things I heard from that was fear of the unknown. And I think the fear of the unknown is really, that is going before you know anything. Fear of the unknown. I think what I kind of wanted to talk about was not necessarily examples for me, but more the truths that I place in my life now after the experiences I've had of going through the resistance and going before I knew, because I feel like for me, they all came down to three things that were stopping me from moving forward or going. I just was extremely stagnant in any kind of decision, which led to that. God's got it. I'm just gonna, surrender. And just because I was this fear of the unknown, I didn't know. And I think that the fear of the unknown really pointed me to just how much I was identifying with my emotions in situations instead of using them as self-reflection tools or using them as ways to learn myself more as I went through the growth process of whatever the situation was. And that has really led to me being more active in terms of my faith and trust in God and going before I know. But another thing that I really learned from the fear of the unknown is that what we do know, we only know because it's already happened. And so when you think about knowing something based on a future decision, when we're learning things, we never know anything until we've experienced it. So as I have kind of allowed these things to resonate, it's when I do feel the resistance, usually there's a fear of the unknown because I want to know how it's going to turn out, just like you were talking about. You want to know so you can either prepare for all the things or, maybe not make that decision because you don't want what the outcome has to bring to you. But just the name of this podcast in itself is time and attention, and that's what's going to equal the growth. And so what's led to so much stagnant, unfulfilled feelings within me. But just going back to the unknown part, it's like the trust in the times that you have pushed through the resistance and gone without knowing, you then have the ability to learn in reverse is essentially how we learn. We can reflect on, we can gain insight from hindsight. And I think just understanding that there's going to be a lesson, you can find the lesson in it, find the perspective shift, find the growth that you've endured, or understand that you're never going to know anything in the future. You have to go, otherwise you're gonna remain stuck. And I just think it's important for me to share that because I was the opposite. I wasn't necessarily, embracing challenges the way that you do. It was more of, I've been told what to do my whole life as an athlete, and I haven't had any practice making my own decisions and seeing the growth come from it. And so now that I'm having to make my decisions and act on obedience, I hesitate, like I mentioned before, but I've also now been able to hold on to the truths that there is a plan already. God knows it. This is an ingredient in a whole meal. And the fear that I'm feeling means that I should go. The fear means go. And I'm going to know what I needed to know through the experience in itself. And once the experience is over, there's going to be another situation where I'm going to have to go without knowing. But the lesson I learned before is going to prepare me moving forward for the next situations I'm going to have to say go to.
I love what you said there about the fear being the trigger to go. I think our fear is where we get triggered to stop or, fight or flight. And a lot of us just get frozen and we think, okay, well, if I just wait this out, like maybe this option will disappear and I won't even have to think about it anymore. That's how I react, at least. Some people are like, well, I'm just going to dive headfirst into this other direction because if I can just procrastinate effectively, like where we pour ourselves into something else as opposed to facing like the main fear, we feel like we're still making progress even though we're actually avoiding what we need to be facing. I read a book. I just finished it. Have been reading for a couple months, and I'll like read it and put it down, read it. What's cool is every time that I pick it back up, I'm like, oh, this is a lesson that I needed to learn over a longer period of time because it's something that I'm so stubborn about. But the book is The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And he talks about that resistance not being a bad thing, how we need that resistance to challenge us to go, that fear is exactly like you said, the trigger to move, to take a step. And on an applicable level, Tim Ferriss talks about this practice called fear setting, and I would highly recommend, if you've never done it, to do it. But it's where you actually will list out your fears and like your deepest fears, and they can be really specific fears. Like, I have a fear of running out of money and being homeless. Like, that is an actual fear of mine. So then there's another column where you say like, what steps can I take to avoid this actually happening? And there's another column where it's like, if this happened, what would I do about it? And once you actually lay it all out, even though you really have no idea what's going to happen, it does provide a little bit of that comfort that we want from that sense of control about a situation. If you understand, like, okay, here's all the things that could go wrong potentially if I do this, here's my deepest fear behind making this move. And then you actually write it down and see, like, oh, there's still things I could do to address worst case scenario here. I'm not just going to die. It really dissolves a lot of the fear around taking big steps like that. So I don't think it's just like close your eyes and step off the cliff. I think it's like, take time to reflect. If you're someone like me who's a big planner and you are really, really dependent on a sense of control and organization, like, don't kick yourself for being like that. Maybe take the time to write out the fear so you can actually see what you're freaking out about and then know how you're going to address it. So you have a game plan kind of in play. And maybe it won't happen the way that you predicted at all, but at least you have a plan, and then you take the next step from there, and you can kind of write it, leave it, and actually take the action, which I think is really helpful on a practical level.
Do you want to share your transition to coaching as an example of that? I feel like that's a pretty big example of facing resistance, but maybe having a plan in place prior, kind of maybe knowing a little bit more about it, but not knowing at all what it could be in the end, what it could, if it was going to work or not, or going to be able to be a solely your income kind of journey.
Yeah. So I was a nurse. I am a nurse, but I was a practicing nurse in a hospital setting for 3 years before transitioning fully to coaching. And I get a lot of people messaging me about, how did you do that? How did you make that call? When was it the time? The thing is, I was coaching for years. I started coaching right when I started college, and I only coached a couple of people, and it was lifestyle, and it's transitioned a lot over time as I've grown. But it was a very gradual process. There was never like I'm a nurse and now I'm a coach. It's like, all right, coaching is picking up a little bit more. I'm also nursing full time. I'm kind of balancing both, and then balancing being an athlete. So I had my hand in all these different areas, but it got to the point where, all right, coaching is growing to the point where I think this could be self-sustaining. And it's also going to get to the point where I'm not able to balance the workload between nursing and coaching effectively, also if I'm going to be a good athlete. So there was a trade-off there in terms of deciding what I valued most, which I think was a big part of it. So it wasn't just I woke up one day and, God's like, telling me like, quit your job, quit your job. No, it was like, I love coaching. I'm kind of getting into this space where I need to pick. And I'm finding myself extremely dissatisfied with nursing. So sometimes there are some like really tangible reasons why you will make a call like that. It's not just like this gut impulse that you suddenly have. But the big decision was a sudden point where I had to decide, do I leave this job and put it all into coaching, leaving a job that's stable, that has benefits, that's predictable, that's probably going to stick around for the next few years at least, that my entire family is saying, this is a reliable job. Why would you leave it for a job that they can't even conceptualize, online coaching? And it was hard to walk away. And I think there were a few things that played into my decision. One was that feeling that nursing was extremely dissatisfying. I was coming home every day from shifts wondering, do I feel kind of sick? Like, if I feel kind of sick, do I not have to go into work tomorrow? There was so much dread for each day. And I think that we have to live in hard times, but I think if you're living with a daily sense of dread, something needs to change. If it's something controllable, something needs to change in your life. So that was a big indicator for me. Also, in terms of fear setting, my worst case scenario would be coaching falls through and I have to go back to nursing. I can do that. Luckily, it's not too difficult to get a nursing job if I maintain my license. So I kind of covered all my bases in terms of my fears, which made that maybe an easier decision than it is for some people who might not have a job that they could go back to, or a spouse who was also making a decent income. So there were a couple of things that played into that decision being a little bit less scary for me. But I think there's still that fear of, I'm in a job that doesn't have benefits, that's pretty unpredictable, that feels like, really, when you're running your own business, it feels like it could fall through any day. You could wake up and it could all be over. But again, that fear setting of, okay, worst case scenario, I can go work at Starbucks. Like, I will figure out a way to make it, because throwing away the plan B showed me that if I have to grind, I have that in me. But I learned that in the process of the faith. I had to take the step. I had to let go of nursing before I realized my skills and the gifts that I have as an entrepreneur and as a coach. I couldn't have learned that in the same way without doing it, which I think you made a great point about. You have to learn it from the experience. You have to do it. There is value in learning from other people and hearing, how did you do it? What was your route to success? What worked for you? What didn't? Sure, learn from other people's mistakes, but you're going to have to also learn from your own mistakes. And I think that's something we often want to avoid. But I honestly think taking a step forward is never a mistake if it's a learning experience.
Yeah, I think a huge part of that example from you is that you, over a period of time, were understanding that something was leading to this dread, something needed to change. You had a passion for something else. There were things that were showing you, this is not, I think it's just so great to talk about. This isn't just one day you get up and you're like, yep, going, dropping everything without a plan, without understanding, really taking the time to self-reflect and be aware of what it is that's causing the dread. Is it actually nursing, or am I choosing to have this perspective every day? Like, there are things that are important before you don't, I guess I just really want to emphasize, like, going before you know is not just kind of going rogue. Like,
It's not reckless.
right. It's not reckless. It's definitely, it's based off of that internal, for me, the Holy Spirit, our intuition. There are different things that we're feeling that are just indicators that something might need to change. I think that is so important to talk about. And I'm going to put you on the spot one more time. I know last time, but I just think that was an example of you choosing another path, making the decision to go, and finding so much fruitfulness from it, and absolutely becoming this passionate coach that is really changing lives in that space. But I know there was another example of some resistance that you felt where you went on a different path and you wanted to enter a different realm of bodybuilding, and then all of a sudden something changed or something happened, or you then were faced with another situation where you may have felt some fear about what people would feel. And I think it would just be cool for you to talk about how maybe a different example where it didn't necessarily come to what you thought it might be.
Yeah. So I competed, for those of you who aren't familiar with bodybuilding, there's different classes within bodybuilding. And for women, especially, a lot of it has to do with the level of muscularity. So I was in figure. I went pro as a figure athlete and decided after starting a prep last year that I wanted to move up to the next more muscular division, women's physique. And I was really excited for that change. I was excited for the opportunity to grow and kind of challenge myself in a new way. And I started pursuing that goal, and I announced it on social media. I remember recording a video with Gasp, one of the brands that I work with, talking about my excitement for physique and how my ultimate goal is to go to the Olympia. And it was scary to even say, because there's that fear of like, if I say this and then it doesn't happen, what does that mean? And what ended up happening with that is I started my off season, I started growing, and I started a cycle in order to grow, which is very common in bodybuilding and not necessarily specific to the women's physique class, but the amount that is used is typically more for those of us who aren't just very naturally gifted at growing. And I started developing some side effects from this. Thankfully, in episodes past, we've kind of talked about the importance of establishing your values, and that has been a massive theme over the past year and a half for me. Thankfully, I knew my values, and I knew that femininity is not something that I want to compromise anymore. And I had to know that that was the value over the value of competing in this class, especially when, for me, there's the option of just staying in figure and continuing to be competitive in that class. But I had to know first what my values were. So I know I go back to that all the time, but it's so important, because I think when we think about knowing before we go, I think it all has to come back to, okay, in this situation, what do I value more? So you can decide what you're going to pursue, because it's typically a this or that situation. Mm-hmm. But with that, I felt comfortable saying to myself, I will stay in figure, but there was that social aspect of, I told everyone I was going to physique. I'm pretty active on social media. I had talked to other athletes about going physique. What will they think about me? Will they think that I'm a wimp? Will they think that I can't do the work? Will they think that all the things? Will they think? And I was so afraid that it would undermine my authority as both a coach and an athlete. And I was very afraid of the implications of that. But I knew my value, and I knew that I couldn't compromise my value just to worry about what other people are going to think. When I learned from coming out, you really have no idea what kind of feedback you're going to get or what opportunities it's going to create. So I made the public announcement that I was staying in figure, and I received so much positive feedback, because there were a lot of people out there who were saying, me too. I don't want to take that much gear. I'm dealing with side effects. I don't know how to manage this. How did you make that decision? Just so many great conversations came out of that I could have never anticipated if I had tried to plan out how all of that was going to go. All I knew was what I valued, and then I had to make a decision based on that. And I think with any decision like this, like you said, it's not reckless. It's not just suddenly you're making this decision, waking up one day feeling this. Sometimes it is, but I think it comes back to knowing yourself enough to know what you value. So knowing what you won't compromise, that will narrow down your decision making a lot. And then finding God in it, both in the moment and in that hindsight, like you said, where we say, okay, where is God working in this right now? I felt God in knowing that my femininity is important to me, and I feel like it was God given. And so that's not something I want to compromise. So I found God in that. And then in hindsight, I found God in all the conversations that came out of that, where I was able to talk to people who were struggling with the same thing, but maybe afraid to talk about it, or there wasn't really a dialogue created in the industry. So it really was such a gift. And I'm so thankful for that opportunity to surrender my pride in that situation, because that was a big hurdle for me,
Mhm.
and to recognize that God was working through it all.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I think that absolutely is so important to talk about, because anytime we're going, before we know the outcome, we are so rooted in our values that we can know that we are staying true to ourselves. We don't have that dissonance, right? Like that I'm this or I'm this or I'm conflicted and I don't know who I am and I don't feel united as one person. It's like, no, I absolutely know who I am, and that will alleviate any kind of, well, did I make the right decision, or second guessing your own true nature. It's like, no, I know. So any kind of negative feedback you may have received, you just know that, okay, everybody has the right to their own opinion, and that's fine, but my people are going to show love, and God's showing me love, and I can find God in it. And you don't have this feeling of shame or regret in terms of your values.
Yeah, I don't think you'll ever regret staying true to yourself. As cliche as that might sound, when I say that, I'm speaking out of that knowing yourself, being understanding who you are, taking that time to do the self work, to stop and get yourself away from the distracting noises of other people's opinions, of your fears, of even the past weighing in on this. Because yes, the past teaches us, but the past teaches us based on that specific situation. So we can't extrapolate what we learned from those things to what we are experiencing now. That's part of the process of learning. But part of the process of learning is actively failing. I think that we get to a point as kids, we're used to failing a lot because we're not very good at a lot of things and we don't really know much. And so we learn everything through doing it poorly, but we receive a lot of encouragement from people usually. If we're in a positive environment, hopefully we have a teacher or a parent or a friend or someone who's encouraging us through our failures to keep trying. But when we're adults, we don't always get that external feedback if we're not doing well, quote, based on some kind of standard. And we aren't always very good at providing ourselves with that feedback of just continuous encouragement, regardless of performance. And I think that we need to reframe failure. Learning happens at 15% failure rate, which means 1 out of every 6 or 7 times we need to fail in order to learn.
Mhm.
But I think sometimes our first try is the failure. You know, I'm sure the first time Michael Jordan threw the ball, he did not get it in the hoop. Like, what if that was the last time he tried because he failed? Or what if that failure was the learning opportunity? What if every missed shot was an opportunity for his brain to dial in how he needed to make an adjustment in order to shoot more accurately moving forward? What if everything in life is like that, where our failures are fine-tuning our brains to be more effective moving forward? And if we start to look at it like that, where failure is pruning you of what's not serving you and priming you to be more effective moving forward, we can start to see it as a positive thing. And so those steps forward aren't as scary, because we know even if it doesn't turn out the way that we think, which usually is pretty limited anyways, based on past experiences, we'll probably learn something from it that's going to help us with future endeavors.
Yeah, totally. It really is such a gift.
So I think that as scary as it can be to be brave in your life, it's so much more rewarding because you really have no idea what's going to come out of it. And the
Yeah.
alternative, I think you mentioned this earlier, but that stagnancy.
Yeah, it's definitely, I know that lukewarm feeling, people can relate to that lukewarm feeling of just not feeling fulfilled. And that's usually another indicator of, all right, something needs to change. You're not growing, or you're not going because of fear or something else. It's like a clear indicator. You don't need to associate or identify with that feeling, but being complacent, that lukewarm, that if you're feeling that lukewarmness, it is probably an indicator that something needs to change. You're ready for more, is what it is. You're ready for more.
And if you're stuck there and you don't know what it is that you need to face in your life, like if you're feeling lukewarm, but you're not really feeling a lot of resistance in an area, I think the fear setting tool is really helpful to identify which way to go. If the obstacle is the way, identify your fears and then say, okay, I'm feeling a lot of fear in this area. Maybe there's something that I need to do in this area. So sometimes that can be the first step before you have that like intuition, gut feeling about which direction you need to go. But I think once you face those fears and you start to build trust in those areas, you start to align yourself better with your intuition in a way that you can hear it more effectively and you can start to build trust with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Last thing, I got the chance a couple of years ago to go to a wedding in Hawaii, and we learned how to surf, but we pretty much just kind of learned on our own. It wasn't instructed or anything. I had a couple of people show me the ropes, and then I proceeded to spend 2 hours out on the water, like completely alone, just absolutely determined to ride one wave. And what's so crazy about surfing is I think that there's only so much you can be taught, and the rest of it has to come from that active failure of understanding the timing. You see a wave coming and you need to start paddling away from it. So you need to start to gauge how quickly you need to turn the board around, how quickly you need to start paddling, how quickly you then need to push yourself up. At what point in the wave you feel enough resistance where you do push yourself up and you get on top of it in a way that you can ride it. It's all about timing, but you can't be taught that timing. It has to come from that repetitive action of learning to really feel the wave.
Mm.
And that only happens through the practice and failure of falling off the board 1,000 times. But it's so rewarding to finally get up and ride it. And it doesn't even matter who else is there. It's just like, yes, my combined efforts over time have led to this success, and it builds confidence in other areas. So start to see life like that. Start to see it as you feel that resistance coming and you start to get that anticipatory rush of, all right, now's my chance to try to stand. Now's my chance to try to ride this. And if you don't, you learn something from it. And the next wave, you're going to be even more effective at riding. And I think that being able to go with the waves like that in life, as opposed to fearing them crashing in on you, is a much more exciting and fulfilling way to live than staying still and being comfortable on the shore.
I have one thing to add. I'm reading this book called The Inner Game of Tennis. And just to add on that, something that I wrote down, I just pulled up my notes, is it's from a coach's perspective, but also teaching coaches and athletes also how to play the inner game, which is the game in the mind, to really get out of this prefrontal cortex of overthinking, judging everything, judging yourself based on your performances, the number of times you're getting up and falling down off the surfboard, just taking that as information. Okay, I, didn't push myself up enough or early enough in the situation. Great. All right, I'll do that again next time. But this book talks about how instruction is language, and a lot of the times obeying instruction versus using the instruction to guide your discovery are two completely separate things that engage in overthinking, trying too hard and not being successful just because you're trying to obey an instruction instead of using the instruction to guide your discovery, which means that you're paying attention to the feel. You're paying attention to how you're feeling yourself get up on their surfboard and ride the waves, because everybody's feel is going to be different. It's not always going to be something that we can put language to. And so it's super powerful to think about that in terms of this in our lives, because if we're taking instruction from others all the time, like you're saying, listening to how other people did it, you might not be able to get up on the surfboard. It has to be based on how you feel, how your process goes based on your connectedness, mind and body. And I just think that tied in really well.
That's so great. That's great. And I think that that is where we are the captains of our soul. That's where we get to have that individual experience of life that makes it unique to us. take what you need from different situations, take what you need from the past, take what you need from your present, take what you need from those around you who God put in your life to inform you or warn you or inspire you. But then be an active participant and actively learn and learn what that feel is like, and learn through failing and falling and winning and crying and all the things. Like, that is the human experience. And I think that sometimes we want to shortcut that and just live in the good moments, but the good moments are only made good by the contrast of the challenges in life. So just want to encourage you guys this week to go out there, practice fear setting, really dig into what your fears are, and then take one step in one area this week and face it, whatever that looks like for you. And I would love to hear your experiences with that. If you just want to leave that in the comments below, I think it would be really cool to start to celebrate the steps that we take forward, and regardless of the outcome of them, the actual steps being the thing that we need to celebrate. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment below. We'll have another episode out for you next week, and we'll catch you next time.